Hello and welcome to everyone who's joining today's Space Store webinar. We'll just give time for everyone to join in. There's a lot of registered attendees today, over 100, and we've just seen the numbers climb. And before we get going, just take the opportunity to say we do welcome Q&A, questions in the Q&A box provided at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A button. We'll try and pick those up later on during the hours webinar and address those, bunching up any similar questions, but welcome those all the way through. So we're a couple of minutes past the time now, so we'll kick off, although some are still joining. And welcome to Space Store's 10th Expert Panel webinar. And this is about the Ascent of Workplace. And we've said from Taylorism to experience-based working. We'll kick off with some introductions and we'll go into the title and what that means for all of us after that. So welcome, AnnLouise. Please give us a bit of a bio.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I've been working on build-outs on the client side for about 20 years now. I've done a number of build-outs, various sizes, various levels of complexity, all the way from full build-outs from shell condition to refreshes of existing space. I'm happy to be working at Verisk Analytics right now, where I'm working on a large build-out in Boston, about 115,000 square feet, where several business units are going to be coming in together to occupy the space. And one of the things I really enjoy about my role is mixing up not just the idea of real estate, but also thinking about the workplace experience side, the inclusion side of space. And really, I look at myself as the partner between the financial side of things, obviously budget being very important, the workplace experience side and the HR side to make sure we're supporting the employees and giving them the best sort of work environment that we can. And then, the branding and the look and the feel and making sure that we're representing the Verisk brand in the right way. So this has been a really fun project to work on, but difficult with COVID, lots to learn through the process. So it's a little bit about me. Thank you.
You're on mute, Nick.
Thank you, Steve. Sorry. And we'll move on to Steve. Thanks very much, AnnLouise. Steve, tell us a bit about your background and what you do.
I work for Moser Associates. We're a firm that designs and builds workplaces. That's all we do. We're pretty global, so we've got 17 offices dotted around everywhere from Shanghai to California. And my job is strategy, or workplace strategy, really. I don't really know what that means, but it's to do with briefing and finding out what makes our clients tick. So that's me. I've got an architectural background. I've been an architect since, I can't remember, 1983, I think. But I don't design stuff anymore. We've got people that do it much better than I do.
That's very modest, I'm sure. Thank you for that. And you work both UK and globally?
Yeah, more globally now than ever, I think. In fact, I was just writing a note to the guys in London saying I'm doing more work overseas than I am in the UK at the moment, which is awkward because you can't travel. But it's mainly Hong Kong, India, which is Bangalore, and Hyderabad, and San Francisco. I think those are the three equally weighted places that I've worked. We had a lot of work recently in mainland Europe, continental Europe, but I don't do so much there anymore.
Excellent, thank you very much. And we welcome back Andy Swann, been a panelist with us before, Andy.
Yeah, hi Nick. Thank you for inviting me back. It means I must have done something right the last time. No, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. Just for anybody who doesn't know me, I guess I'm author of a book called The Human Workplace. My work kind of straddles the relationship between people, organizations, and work. So kind of somewhere between HR, facilities, workplace design, operations, with a bit of change and transition management and a bit of futurism and things like that thrown into the middle. I currently run a company called My Amazing Team. We have various elements in that. We have MAT Studios, which is our innovation focused arm, where we work with quite large organizations, a scale of kind of Coca-Cola, probably one of our biggest clients, and we help them create ideas for products and services and help them kind of validate those with their audience. Then there's Elevate Labs, which is our kind of tech and creative side, where we help both organizations and brands kind of understand how to connect, whether it's with their internal employees, whether it's with their external audience, but regardless of that, it's connecting organizations with people. And then there's the Andy Swann side of it, the part that writes the books and does the speaking, and here I am. So yeah, thank you for having me back.
No, thanks very much. That's brilliant, Andy, and certainly endorse your speaking from some events we've been pleased to have you attend. Okay, and Russell.
Thanks, Nick. I'm Russell Kingston. I'm the Managing Director for the US arm of Space Door. Although I'm in UK at the moment, with travel restricted, it's made us challenge all of our ways of operating and communicating. So there's been challenges, but also some really interesting ideas and workarounds and thoughts that are coming forward. So I'm very interested in exploring this whole subject, particularly the way that the experience in the workplace is changing and the needs are changing, and we need to be flexible and adapt to what's coming at us and take advantage of it. So very interested to explore with our panelists today and see where it takes us.
Absolutely. And I'm Nick Baxter, Managing Director in Space Store UK, although I don't really like the title, it feels a bit old-fashioned these days, but very much a leaning towards the strategic and marketing and what's going on out there side of things. So we'll get started. Again, for all those who joined in the last few minutes, we're welcoming questions. We'll pick them up later on after 30 or 40 minutes. Please use the Q&A chat box, which is in the center of your screen if you're on a desktop at the bottom. So we welcome questions and viewpoints. We aim to make our webinars very authentic. They're not very scripted. I doubt if any of us have got any notes, and we don't all agree. We know that already. So the title, The Ascent from Taylorism, I guess that refers to Frederick W. Taylor and a very efficiency-based corporation comes first. Not much consideration for any of us as individuals. And I'm sure some in the audience have studied these things, and there's a whole list of names along with Taylor. There was Gantt, who probably invented the Gantt chart, and Hathaway and Gilbreth and various people who were all about efficiency. And I believe that there's been an ascent already to a high point in office design and workspace, catering to individuals. I think we've seen various forms of that, the agency and the mobility that tech has brought along, whether it was pagers and bleepers through to today's tech. And I think we're through activity-based working, and we're considering for individuals, not only the work type, but for individuals' preferences and the experience that they need to have a very fulfilling time at work. Would you agree with that, do you think, Steve, as an outline of where we've come?
Yeah, pretty much. I agree with the fact that I think we've moved on from activity-based working. Taylor gave rise to the myth that you can measure productivity, because in his day you could, because people were making things individually. So he measured that. But we've long since moved on from that, I think. And now we're into another realm. We've moved to, as you say, looking at what individuals want, but more importantly, probably what collections of individuals want, what the organization as a culture is expecting from its workplace. And that's quite exciting because it's much more difficult to design for that. I think designing for something that works properly and gives you all the space and the facilities you need should be a given. Any competent architect or engineer or interior designer can get to grips with that so that you turn up to work and everything works pretty much as it should. We've moved on to a place where you're designing to make a work environment fit the expectations and the values of the company and the people that work there. That's much trickier, but it's more exciting.
When you say it's a given, do you think that's happening pretty effectively and normally and everywhere then, that we're actually doing the essentials?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, workplaces are never perfect, are they? We all know that. It's like buying shoes for a 3-year-old. They don't fit on day one, they're too big. And then you've got to throw them away when they can't get them on anymore. But in the middle, there's about a week when they fit nicely. It's the same with workplaces. It's an imperfect science. But I do think that people are, you know, generally competent, and you know, the lights come on and the internet works usually. You got enough desks usually. It's an imperfect science, but the more difficult thing I think is to get a workplace that resonates with the culture of a business, largely because it's difficult to write down what a culture is. It's difficult. You smell it, you see it, but you can't describe it. It doesn't give itself to words. So it's a much bigger challenge, I think. The rest of it, if you can't get the lights to work and the right number of desks, well, you got to try a bit harder. But we have moved on. I'm convinced of that.
Well, that's a great kickoff. Glad of your thoughts, AnnLouise, around that. How's your experience dovetail into this?
Well, one of the things that I found interesting about working on build-outs is realizing that when you're starting the process, you're usually on a 10-year lease, but who knows what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years as far as how the workplace needs to be adapted to however the business is moving. So I think that that's always going to be a challenge because the real estate process is very slow, but workplaces need to be adaptable quickly. So for me, one of the things I've been focusing on is flexibility within the space and realizing that what you design on day one isn't going to work 100% perfectly on day, 1,000, and realize that there are going to be things you need to change and adapt and fix. And it's not done when you're done and you move in. It's got to be naturally sort of a iterative process where you recognize that there's things you need to change and you plan for that. It's not a surprise.
That's a very good point, very strong point. I think planning for iterative development, that's not always recognised, is it? I think that's very much goes with Steve's analogy of the kiddies' shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, glad to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm going to say anything particularly controversial here. I think that iterative development perspective is a really interesting one, and I think we've kind of captured the basics here in that essentially what a workplace exists for is to enable the people who are coming to it to do their best work or the work they need to do at any given time. I mean, obviously this year we're extending that to kind of talk about different locations and more remote and flexible working, but at the fundamental kind of part of the conversation, business needs are going to change. So yes, workplaces as we design them, whether that's in one place, in multiple places, they're going to need to be able to adapt quickly to the changing kind of pressures of the world or the changing needs of a business. But also we then need to deliver, what people need to be able to work effectively on an individual level, on a team level, on an organizational level. And to go into what Steve was saying around capturing that cultural kind of thing, how do you enable a culture? How do you capture it? And actually it flexes and it varies, and you almost need to kind of capture the essence of the business or the brand, but then interpret it for different needs and different locations. What one brand's workplace might look like in Shanghai, that same brand's workplace in the middle of New York is going to kind of need to be recognizably that organization, but have that kind of that feel that's respectful of where it is and also the local culture. So there's all of these different things at play. And I think now we're before this year happened, we were already in this process of realizing that we need to account for all of these things. And I think now that conversation has escalated even further, given the fact that this year has been a great example of how change has happened. You need to adapt now. You know, it wasn't a case of like 10 years ago, you had smartphones coming in and that changed the way we work. And I think you mentioned it, Nick, you know, before that there was pagers or there was Wi-Fi that suddenly meant we weren't tethered to single desks during the day. Actually, this year, it was like a completely enforced situation where we went from kind of workplace innovation as a luxury to workplace or as a choice to workplace innovation by necessity and immediately. And to go back to what AnnLouise was saying about we need to be able to adapt fast, absolutely. And that's kind of where we are. But we're seeing this bigger picture of it's not just about creating an environment where people have to work, is creating an environment where they can work and potentially even where they want to work. Now they haven't been in the office for a certain number of months.
Yes, 100%. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, but do you think there, Andy, that just going back to your point there, the place where people want to work, the base needs of the people that are coming into the workplace have changed, haven't they? They've been shifted. So what they might have thought of as important before we were hit with this change has now perhaps pivoted a bit. So the experience has got to change with that.
Completely. I mean, you know, here in the UK, I mean, it was only yesterday that the government said for the next 6 months, if you can work from home, you should work from home. Now, you know, yes, most of us or a lot of office workers can sit at their kitchen table in their underwear and open a laptop and do XYZ task. Does that mean that they'll be performing to their optimum capability? Does that mean they'll be getting the leadership or the connection with the team they need? Will that support the collaboration they need? So then how do you define can work from home? Yeah, what do you do about the ergonomics? What do you do about the well-being of people? And then actually, you know, what can the workplace offer that is over and above that ability to plug in a laptop? And you know, when you talk about the kind of tasks people need to do or the activities they need to do, you know, collaboration, connecting with each other, really feeling part of something. Something I've been talking about recently is this idea of, you know, workplaces or offices evolving to become almost the private members club of the brand. You know, it's where you really go to be part of something and mix with the other people who are really part of it too and feel part of that exclusivity. And in doing so, play the biggest part you can in the brand. That's not to say you can't work from home, but that's also to say there is a value to still going to a location for certain reasons.
Yeah, I think all of us have come to appreciate how valuable face-to-face human connection is when it's taken away from us, haven't we?
Russell, you said earlier, Russell, that people's needs have changed. Give us an example of needs that have evolved over the last, I don't know, whatever planning horizon you had in your head.
Okay, as perhaps needs, desires, I don't know quite the right way to put it. It's a good question. One I think has changed is that we're much more conscious, all of us, of hygiene and what we feel comfortable with. I mean, it's kind of an obvious point, I know, but that then flows through into what is a comfortable and enjoyable experience for me in the workplace. I think, AnnLouise, you spoke about, you know, being face to face and close together, and as we were packing offices out, as things were getting more dense. Actually, this is a really good move. We're moving away from that. We're spreading out. We're actually making it a more hygienic workplace through necessity, but actually that's a really positive change. So I think it's not that these things kind of bring some of those things up to the fore more. I think that's one example which has been very prevalent. There are others as well. I mean, I think for myself, the work from home piece and the lack of physical human connection, I felt that a big loss. And so when you can get physical human connection in a safe way, you appreciate that more, and it would be higher up on my list of needs, I suppose, than it would have been before I'd been through this experience. But go on, you say what your thoughts are around this.
No, one of the things I think that is becoming received wisdom right now is the need for a workplace to function as a club, if you like, because we all know that you can produce stuff with kit that you can hold under your arm, like a laptop and a phone. So that you have to say, well, why do you bother going into an office? has it got any function? And the answer is obviously just to rub shoulders with your colleagues. That's kind of the only reason left. So you might as well make it work for that. When you're not rubbing shoulders with your colleagues or talking to them, then you have to hit a keyboard or make a call. So it has to be both. You have to do both. You can't just go to the office to have a good time or meet people. The day will be too long. So it does have to be both. And it's really healthy, I think, that inevitably means challenging the fact that everybody drives a desk. A desk is a sort of, it's a medieval piece of furniture that somehow survived right through to the 21st century. We can do better, and we are beginning to do better, but there are places where I work, and I'm sure you guys have, where if you haven't got a desk, you're not really treated with respect. And so you can't yet get away with it. People do love them. I just wanted to bring up something that AnnLouise said, which I thought was very good, which is to do with planning horizons and the fact that leases are 5 or 10 years. Business planning horizons are always much shorter than leases, and that's a huge problem. And that's what we're fighting against or with all the time, is that you sign a 10-year lease and you don't even know what's going to happen next year. So that's a very good point, and he's bearing in mind, because it's the biggest bugbear in our industry.
That's good. I liked what you said before this, AnnLouise, about assembling that kind of kit of parts, how you're looking at that with your office spaces globally. I think that's a really important point. We need those tools at our disposal to be able to flex. I think we've been taught that major disruption can and does happen, and we don't want to be caught in a place where we can't flex towards that. But tell us a little bit about how you're handling that as you go through your build-out experience right now.
Well, one of the things that we're finding is going to be really important for us is to, like you said, Steve, to give people a reason to go back to work. And one of the things that we're realizing, I've been fortunate, I've been with my company for many years, so I've built relationships with, you know, all different people in all different departments, but we're realizing that newer people coming on board haven't had the opportunity to do that. So, you know, video is certainly better than not, but it's not the same thing as being in person. So what we're looking at is we're looking at taking our space. We've tried to design it in such a way that, you know, we have plenty of closed area rooms where people can meet, open areas where people can collaborate, so people can make their choices. Because what you might find on day one works for you, if it's very rigidly designed, like everyone must go and sit at a desk and that's where you work, and you find out in 6 months that a lot of people just aren't really, that's not resonating with them, they need other places to go. So what we've tried to do, and it's guessing, is really building different places where people can work and let people vote with their feet and pick up and move in the places that work for them. And, you know, and one of the other things that we've done is our desks, and this is just very nuts and bolts, our desks are all freestanding. So if we need to kind of do some reconfiguration, as long as the desk is near the spine where people can plug in, they'll be able to do that. What else we're doing for flexibility's sake is we've got, you know, again, nuts and bolts, we're doing a double monitor arm with a universal docking station. And we purposely upped the capacity on these to a higher voltage, because realizing we don't know what's going to come down the pike for technology down the road that may need need more electricity to run well. So just trying to future-proof. There's so many different things we've tried to do to future-proof that, you know, you can't do it 100%, but trying to be mindful of that through our whole design process as best we can, and recognizing that, you know, there are things that we're going to get wrong, and that's okay. It's just recognizing that and trying to fix it. But one thing we are trying to mandate is a 90-day rule when we move in, that it's going to be very different for everyone. Not everyone's going to like it right away. So for 90 days, leave everything the way it is in place, all the processes and everything, so that people can get used to the new office and how it's supposed to be, how we hope it's going to be used. And then after that period, look at how's the hoteling working? Do we need to tweak that? Are the conference rooms, do we have enough bookable ones? Do we have enough impromptu? That sort of thing. So just recognizing there are going to be changes and not being afraid of that.
Probably speaks to our big question this session, AnnLouise, which is, are we seeing an enormous change through this whole thing? Or is it really just incremental on this continuum? I think we've all acknowledged that there's been great change in favour of individuals as people, not just a number or an employee statistic. So there's change and there's improvement always going on. We reached, in my view, we'd reached a high point by March of this year, where we saw leading designs and very, very considerate employers doing great things in their space, providing a lot of needs outside of the day job, be it shops, refreshments, gyms, prayer rooms, you name it. And is there a massive shift, or is it really just obvious next steps that we're going to see through this whole crisis? Any views?
Well, I think, again, it's going to be an iterative process. And I think it's important that when companies choose what sort of amenities they want to offer their employees, that they actually try and figure out what their employees want, rather than just throwing the latest and greatest thing at them, as far as like, well, Google's doing this, so let's do X, Y, Z. Well, maybe it doesn't work for your company. Maybe they don't, maybe your employees don't want that. So part of our process when we were starting to design a space, we had several visioning sessions with different groups of people at the company, and really tried to dig into what they wanted for their office. And our people are very, very smart, a lot of advanced degrees, a lot of scientists, engineers. And it was sort of funny. One of the things they asked for was more conference rooms and really great technology in the conference rooms. And we didn't have anything really. We want a speakeasy, or we want a bowling alley. No one wanted any of that. They were very serious about what they wanted. And we did try to incorporate some fun things, but a lot of the desire at the beginning was like, we want a space that's going to let us be productive. Here's some of the issues that we have with the space now. Let's address those first. And then definitely, we want to have some fun as well, but we really focus, like, let's give people what they need to do their work without trying to force the trendy, cute stuff on anyone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think substance over style at all times. Anybody can paint walls bright and stick stencil values up all over the walls, but actually, unless you're enabling people to do their best work, it's a pointless exercise. And actually, I think to go back to that idea of kind of incremental and iterative shift, actually, that's how it should be. We should always be looking at our workplaces at that constant kind of evolutionary perspective, because there'll always be a game changer, and we don't necessarily know what that will be. I mean, I think as much as COVID-19 has been a huge impact for many workplaces this year, a lot of the most forward-thinking workplaces were already thinking along these more flexible, remote, kit of parts, personal experience, enabling workplaces. But it's just forced the hand of a lot of the kind of, let's use the adoption curve terminology, a lot of the laggards have kind of had to start thinking about this. And before it, Wi-Fi, we already mentioned, untethered people from desks, and people weren't expecting the boom of smartphones and everybody to start working, almost from, or be able to work from their phone. And we adapt to that. And so the chances are we don't actually know what that big next game changer will be, or how quickly it will come. And so we kind of have to be ready. And I think as both Steve and Louise have kind of mentioned, we have to be ready for those things, even if we can't see them on the horizon. So we have to be constantly kind of iterating and looking and basically being in touch with our people to say, what do you need to be able to do your best work? And 9 times out of 10, to be able to do your best work, you don't need a football table or a beanbag. You need something that helps you achieve the task that you need to get done. So it's almost far simpler than it's been made to look a lot of times.
But along with that, Andy, are you finding when you're with your clients, and I know you deal with some very large corporations, is what needs to be provided, the kit of parts, actually go through the physical space and kind of touch on HR as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time at the moment. You know, we've moved this conversation on in the last few months, this notion of the hybrid workplace coming. Yeah, whereas, you know, a lot of people may kind of work from other locations or satellite locations rather than in their big main office where everybody goes, and you've got this kind of almost the kit of parts extends to working where you need to work or you want to work to get things done on that particular day. So it's kind of shifted that. But then, you know, there is this kind of knock-on effect, which a lot of organizations are kind of grappling with at the moment of saying, well, actually, if we're enabling or if our people have to work from home or remotely, what do they need in order to do that? To not only allow them to connect and do the work, but in order to do it to the best of their ability, you know, from a comfort perspective, from a well-being perspective, from a leadership and achievement perspective. And then that kind of comes through, because then if people are untethered from the traditional office and you still got contracts to touch on that HR piece that say you have to be in XYZ location during XYZ hours on XYZ days, then actually you can equip people all you want, but then you're still kind of managing them under this old style approach. So this whole relationship is shifting. The dynamic of that relationship between the people, the organizations, the work they do, and actually all the different interplays in that are part of this picture. So whenever we now talk about workplace design, we kind of need to talk about workplace strategy as a whole, and also how that knocks on, not just from a facilities point of view. Yeah, how do you manage spaces that are used less, and what services do you need to provide, but also, you know, what equipment do people need when they're remote? How does that work from an operational perspective? How do you manage those contracts? How do you communicate with people? How do you lead them? It's a whole kind of, you know, organizational experience or employee experience design, which is now coming in to part of this conversation, as opposed to here's our, you know, workplace 2.0 or the next version of our office. It's a whole kind of, I hate to use the word holistic, but it is a holistic conversation that's happening.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's confusing. Yeah, no, I don't know that many organizations that were ready for this and were excited by it, because we still tend to work very siloed. So it's kind of quite daunting, even for the largest, actually, even where for the largest organizations who have the biggest complexity and the most different locations already to juggle. Actually, they're the ones who are struggling with this notion of, do we try and embed some of these changes that have been forced in 2020, or do we try and get back to where we were and then gradually start to kind of increment again? How big a leap do we take at the moment? Yeah. So yeah, interesting times.
And getting back is probably a bit, it's probably not what's going to happen, is it? Bouncing back, we had someone speaking to us the other day about bouncing forward. So we take the gains, we take the gift of new ideas and thinking that this has forced us into.
An interesting question that's come in from one of the attendees, talking about looking at, are people just implementing spaces as they've designed them pre-pandemic, or are they making changes? And are we thinking about what the next pandemic might do in workplace design right now? That's a pretty interesting one. I'll throw that one your way, Steve.
Yeah, everybody's talking about it. And a lot of our clients want answers now, and we don't actually have them. And I think we are in the early days of getting ready for the next year or two. A sample of 6 months seems like an eternity, but it's been a warm summer. People have worked at home for the first time in many cases, and it hasn't been so bad. I think if you ask those same people again in 6 months in February, they might think differently about it. So the sustainability of home working is up for grabs. We don't know if it's going to last. And we were talking earlier about, I think it was AnnLouise was saying, you know, new starters, onboarding. It's a really good point. You can't onboard someone virtually very effectively, I think most people would agree. So there has to be a hearth for people to turn to, and that has to be populated, and it has to look the part. I was going to ask Andy, you were talking about the workplace, and it made me think that working at home has proved for a lot of people that the biggest component of the working environment is probably the communications infrastructure and the internet and all the clockwork that's completely, well, more or less invisible. Do you think that's brought that to the fore, and people realise that it's like a mycelium that goes everywhere? Is that
I think that's a great point, Steve. I mean, it has brought it to the fore, and I think what's happening now, after 6 months, where people are seeing that this infrastructure is holding up, we're now starting to think more about, okay, well, if this is going to hold up, and it is a possibility that people can work remotely or from home more often, then actually, is there something more they need than their kitchen table or an uncomfortable chair? And what's it going to do to their backs if they're working for 2 hours lying down in bed before they go to sleep? And so it's that, again, it's that kind of that iteration of that conversation where, first of all, it was, can we work remotely? And now it's, well, how do we improve that experience to integrate that into our entire workplace thinking? So yeah, it's you've kind of already, even in this short time, seen the evolution of this conversation.
But I read an interesting summary of a paper that just the other day that was written a long time ago. It's not a new thing, but it brought up this idea of conviviality in the workplace, which is a hot topic. So if you go to work because other people are there, what does that look like? Now, this paper said that they'd examined several ways of doing it, and they determined with quite strong numbers that short bursts of collaboration were a lot more effective than a continuum. So if you go to the office and you hang out there for as long as you like, people come and go, you'll feel connected, but you may not be productive. And the essence of this paper, as I say, it's an old one, it's written in 2016. It said that actually people are much more focused when they say, let's on Thursday meet up and we'll have a cup of tea and a biscuit, but we're going to concentrate on one particular topic. And I thought that was very interesting. So it gave a sort of more nuanced view to conviviality and collaboration. I hadn't thought of that before, I must say.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's something I would bear out and agree that that's what we've seen in a number of different locations. I mean, I don't know about you, AnnLouise. Is that something that you factor into your designs or your thinking?
Well, it's funny because when we started the design process on this project, COVID hadn't, wasn't even on the horizon. So we were designing an office for 600 people that would have an assigned desk. And we always knew that down the road, we would probably implement some sort of a hoteling atmosphere to accommodate growth. But then COVID happened and we had to adapt. But the general design of the office was always to make sure that you were providing people with quiet places to work, but also places where you could have those sort of casual collisions that were unintentional, but also give people space where they could quickly break out and jump into a room and have a impromptu, purposeful conversation or whatever. So again, just providing that variety for us, because we knew we didn't want to script everything. You can't script everything. You want to allow for spontaneity. So again, just plenty of different places that allow people to connect in different ways. And one of the big things that we really focused on too were acoustics and acoustical privacy, because that was a complaint about some of our older space where you could go in a conference room and be having maybe a difficult conversation with someone, and the people next door could hear every word. So again, not just providing people the different spaces that can accommodate things, but making sure that people are comfortable to have the kinds of conversations that they need to have where it's appropriate. So again, I keep saying flexibility over and over again, but that's sort of how I feel we have to think of how is your space set up now and how are you going to be able to adapt it when your needs become more clear or they change over time.
Is there a conflict in the workplace between the need for people to get their head down and do some focused work and the other need for them to be connected and in touch and to have serendipitous conversations, which a lot of people dine out on? And that's a tough compromise, isn't it?
One of the things that we're looking at within our new space is it's all the workstations are in the open area, and we're breaking them up into neighborhoods. And my advice is to be within the different groups within their neighborhoods, that they sort of set what their expectations are for their particular group. So for example, say you're in the operations/HR team where I sit, we're loud, we're back and forth, yelling over to each other, whatever, and that works for us. So for us, that's acceptable. And then maybe if you want your quiet moment, you go into a room. Other groups may want the exact opposite, where they're open area and they're at their desk, that's their heads down quiet space. And then if they want to collaborate and connect, they can just go into a room. So recognizing that it's going to be up to those groups to figure that out, and they're going to set the cultural norms within their individual neighborhoods, and giving them the freedom to do that, but also making sure that if you're in an open area and it's a quiet space, you've given people enough places where they can get up and move, so they don't feel annoyed that they're basically walking in circles around the floor trying to find a room. You got to make it convenient and easy. So again, that flexibility and giving people the different options and letting them pick and choose, and not force a certain style on people, allow them to adapt it for how their groups work together and recognize they're all different.
And does allowing people that agency or that freedom, do you think that impacts productivity? We've got a question on about the importance of time and remuneration and management. Question from Chris, which is quite an interesting one, because where our title started, it was all about efficiency, and really individuals were not being considered. But are we losing any of that, do you think, the corporations, or is the total effort losing anything through that personal side?
What's the question from Chris?
We work 24/7 in a globally connected world. How important is the element of time and management and remuneration related to it?
It's the remuneration bit that threw me, I think. I haven't got a comment on that.
No, can I jump in here? So I think this is part of this kind of shift in joined up thinking that I was talking about, and actually it's a change in that relationship. So previously, workers have been used to being told, you work between these hours in this location and this is how you do it. Right now we're saying, we trust that you're the right person in the job. We're going to give you the platform to do your work, but it's up to you. In as much as it's up to you to get your work done, actually it's also up to you to draw a line and say, I've done my work. Yes, we're working in a 24/7 world, and we all could work 24/7, but we do also have to take some responsibility for ourselves to say, you know what, I've done my work for the day, now I stop, because we could all work constantly. And I think in as much as we should be expecting employers to take responsibility for the well-being of their people and not expect them to work 24/7. Actually, as individuals, we have to take some of that responsibility. If we're now given that flexibility to fix our own kind of working locations or hours, we have to take some responsibility for ourselves. Now, again, that then part of the difficulty there is that individuals work in different ways. Some people like freedom and are really capable of managing their own time and are able to say, no, now I stop, or draw a hard line. And other people are unable to draw that line and end up working and not know when to stop. But other people equally need the structure to be able to get themselves motivated, to know, I go to this location, this is the time I'm working, this is how I'm working. So again, it comes back to the individual, and that then, as a knock-on to go back into the HR area, is a shift of how we manage people, how we enable people, how we lead them. And it is this kind of swapping of that relationship. And we're in the transition of that from, the organization expects you to be here and do this in this location, to, we're going to give you a platform to do your work. But actually you as an individual and what you need to do that, have to take some responsibility, but also we need to be able to know where your boundaries are.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that has echoes of that old chestnut about people being remote. You don't know if they're working or not. And I think the simple response to that is, you can have people sitting right in front of you and you still don't know if they're working or not. And I think Chris's point about the 24/7 thing is, we know that some people never stop working. They're workaholics. They'll be on they'll respond to an email at 11 o'clock at night, and they'll be back on it at 6. and others don't. But that's the same wherever people are. I think you sniff out the people that are workaholics and not very productive, and vice versa. It's a very challenging management task, and I don't think being remote makes it any harder or any easier. Actually, I think it's the same both ways.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong point, Steve, because that was all happening before COVID, wasn't it? We can answer. Someone just said working from phone, which I thought was interesting. A bit different to working from home. We've been working from phone for a long time. One question's come in about the permanency of some of the changes that have arisen. From Rebecca, we're making shifts. We've got a more distanced workplace. What I've been hearing from contacts around the globe is that mainly schemes are going ahead as they were planned, but they'll be repopulated as hygiene and safety and regulations allow. But any offers on that one?
Well, we really looked at what our space was, how people were going to be comfortable in our space after we moved in, and we reduced the overall number of cubes to give people more room, realizing that, you know, the shoulder-to-shoulder model, the benching model, was probably not going to be very popular, which you talked about earlier. I hope the benching doesn't come back. I never liked the idea of people being squashed in like that. No one likes that. So I'm hoping that we're able to allow for growth and flexibility through a hoteling or unassigned desks and working from home, rather than going back to like everyone's supposed to be in 5 days a week and you're squashing as many people into a space as you can to be efficient, because, you know, no one likes that.
It goes along with providing that choice of places, doesn't it, and settings.
Yeah, it is a choice thing. And some people do like being squashed in. We deal with quite a lot of tech clients, and one of the problems we've got is as they grow, they move to a new building and all of a sudden they have 200 square feet per person or something like that, and they don't like it because they're too dispersed. The intellectual capital is spread too thinly, and they get very grumpy about it, and they get all nostalgic about the place where they came from, where they were hugger-mugger, and it seemed to have some energy. And being dispersed and spread thinly is not their bag at all, and it's very difficult to deal with, because what are you going to do? Close off the 3 floors of a building so that people are compacted again? It's a really interesting problem. Being spread thinly isn't necessarily a good idea. I think the choice is a good one there.
Clearly doesn't suit that firm's culture to get the extra space, does it?
Well, it depends. I mean, the like we were talking about earlier, the business planning horizons are quite short, so you have to make impossible decisions about what your likely headcount growth is going to be 3, 4, 5 years ahead, when you actually have no idea what the business is going to be doing then. So dealing with that, bad fit is the biggest single challenge without it going pear-shaped.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about this, where, as you're saying, AnnLouise, that the positive effects of giving people more space, and as you say, Steve, it doesn't work for everyone, but then there's this inevitable pressure of a drive for efficiency, a drive to keep costs where they should be. So it'll be very interesting to see. I don't think any of us knows what it's going to look like, but where the settling point is between those two things. Does that get answered through more of a hybrid hoteling model, or does there become, actually, as things get safer over time, if they do, a drift back to a more dense model? It's going to be an interesting transition.
I don't think it'll settle anywhere. It's more likely to carry on being quite a wide spectrum of approaches like we've got now, really.
And I think on that, to go back to what AnnLouise was saying at the beginning, is, every organization is different. Their needs are different. Their culture's different. They have to design for their own needs, not just follow a trend that someone else is doing. Because like you mentioned, AnnLouise, like Google have done this, therefore we should do this. That's not the case. And I think if there is one opportunity from the way things are currently, it's the fact that things have been shuffled up and disrupted, and actually every individual organization can say, well, what do we need? What can we do? And then, I don't think we can, to go back to that word permanency, we can't design for permanency, but then we've kind of been realizing that anyway, because we've already started to realize that the way people work shift, the way technology evolves shifts, all the different demands on a workplace shift, and it's actually that designed for the people within your own organization at any given time, but with a view to being able to shift that going into the future as demands and needs change, maybe even at the drop of a hat, as they did this year.
And I think one of those changes, Andy, and it's a bit of a counter this, but I hope it's all right, is that a lot of us need to take our businesses more digital, and that probably needs more teams, and they're slightly different teams, different profile, maybe in different demographic. And what we've seen is that's one reason people come along saying we want to be like Google, because they know they need tech teams to make that digital transformation. So
yeah, I think that's a great point, Nick. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, there's a benchmark for how one company's done it. But I think you should always take inspiration from what other people have done. Yeah, I mean, Steve will say you always start with a mood board. You find out about that organization. What do their people need? How do they want to work? What inspiration is out there from great examples from other people doing it? But then interpret it for that particular organization, because Google is the only Google. Your organization is the only version of your organization. So it's to take inspiration and then interpret it for your organization. But I think, there's always a tendency to go, oh, they've done it, therefore we should. But that doesn't mean it will work for you. So,
yes.
I think with successful companies, if I think about it, some of the permanence comes from the people. If the people have a describable sense of purpose, of the reason that they turn up and do their work, and it's clear what the business is all about, that permanent overarching raison d'etre allows for lots of changes underneath it. People will put up with a lot if they feel valued and they think that they're on a good track. So that's almost the second most important part of the working environment. If the first one is the ubiquity of the virtual communications network, the internet and all that malarkey, then the second most important thing you could argue is in the work environment are the people and the relationships, your colleagues, and what the leadership looks like. Then you've got to put a roof over it and keep the weather out. That's the bit that we're interested in. Interestingly, that's the most visible part, and it's the bit that everybody can see from outside. You can't bluff that. You can't blag an office. When you walk in, it either feels right or it doesn't. And I think that's what's kind of interesting about it, even though it's not anymore the most important bit. We've gone down a bit.
That's a great point. I love what you said, Steve, before this as well, about not letting the office get in the way. So there's certain things like that that are really good, and every organisation is different. That purpose, those values, those things that flow through it, and it's really important that in a big change and shift round like we're seeing now, it's very important that doesn't happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
I've
had lots of humbling experiences there.
Just to flag up while we're going through that, Amanda's posting the next session. One or two are leaving now, which we respect, but the next session on the 22nd of October, where we have number of speakers. One confirmed is Stefan Kamenzin, who was heavily involved with Google Designs going back from Evolution in Zurich. So do register for those. We've got another question here from Brianne, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Do we anticipate employers providing physical work tools and tech, both for home and office? Well, I'll kick off, and what we're hearing is that employers are not providing very much for the home, but that probably varies. Andy, what are you finding?
Yeah, I'll extend that and say you're right. At the moment, it varies, but in the main, there are employers not providing very much. So I guess you're providing the infrastructure to work. Laptop potentially, and because most people work out of the cloud now, actually you can log on and get into your systems if you need to. So you can work from home, but in terms of that extended, kit of parts and and the comfort angle and other equipment, then right now, not many are providing it. Some are starting to. I've talked with a few companies recently who have shipped out monitors and provided kind of ways for workers to kind of receive a chair or purchase a chair at a reduced rate or something like that. But I think as this goes and all of this hybrid workspace kind of starts to embed, then we're going to see more and more of it. But it will be, you know, schemes that are developed by organizations. And again, some more of that joined up thinking. Yeah, it will go through HR and it will go through your payroll and it will go through, you know, facilities talking about what we can and can't provide. So yeah, we're at the very early stage of this conversation.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're coming up to time. I've got a few takeaways. It'd be good if we get maybe one or two takeaways each from this session. And I think a great one was that internal visioning session, so that when we're designing forward, we're actually talking to the people who are the culture. Thought that was a great point, AnnLouise.
I think that is a really important thing, and it's also making sure that you're talking to a wide variety of people, not just the senior team.
Yes, great point. Yeah. What's your key takeaway, Steve?
I think it's nice that everybody was kind of agreeing that leases are too long. We want a 3-month lease. It's a huge issue.
It may come.
Yeah, I think it will. Called co-working.
Andy, give us.
I mean, I think I'll take both of those and run with them. And I think, you know, I think it's really, you need to kind of take all of these things into account and not just expect drawings straight away. You know, don't immediately say, we need to change our workplace, give us some drawings, because actually there is all of this upfront visioning. There's the understanding of the culture, how you capture it, what may be down the line, you know, as a business, that all needs to come into account before you end up with that set of drawings. Otherwise you are just going to end up with, you know, some bright pink walls with a couple of values stenciled on and something that's going to be irrelevant in a couple of years. So you know, probably a message to you know, senior leadership: have patience, get the concepts down first and deal with the right stuff, which is enabling your people, and then that will then flow into the drawings that you so badly crave.
Yes. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think doing the work up front, that visioning work, and not rushing into the drawing phase is really, that's going to make sure what you get is probably better than what it would be if you just rushed into it.
I think with the environment we're in now, the post-project analysis as well becomes ever more important. Make sure we have got it right and that we pick up when it needs to evolve.
I agree strongly with that. A lot of clients don't see it that way. You know, projects have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when the project's delivered and the keys are chucked in the right pair of hands, people don't like revisiting it very much. I think they should.
Yeah, agree.
I think another one is this whole kit of parts concept, which is kind of something a lot of the industry strives for, I believe. Designers and we as furniture people, it's actually a theme of a lot of stuff we do. It is in fact a kit of parts, but I think what we're seeing is there's more variety and a much bigger kit is probably needed.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll never stop evolving. Absolutely.
Good. Well, thanks all. We're right on time now, and thanks to all of our audience and everyone who's participated, and to our guest speakers again, AnnLouise and Steve and Andy. Thanks very much. Do sign up for the 22nd of October at our next session. And thanks for joining, and we'll say bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.